This whole Lindsay Clancy thing is proof of how out of control social media is and how toxic it's been to society. We were not really meant to interact with an infinite amount of minds and cultures, as has been evident since 2006 or so, whenever texting was created. Now, I was warning of this in my first video of her regarding the pink shirts and how the social narrative has, for a long time now, been that girls are good and boys are bad. I was worried this storyline would exacerbate things, and it has, but I didn't predict this retaliation in kind. And I wanted to get this out before tomorrow, just in case they finish deliberating and sentence her by tomorrow, because these two videos I'm making on Lindsay have little to do with her and more to do with the ecosystems reacting to it, and so I don't want the sentencing of her to be somehow interacting with my video. And I don't want to call out individuals on this, but many are the people who like to roleplay as hyperchuds, even though they're actually more centrist or even slightly liberal in some cases. And I'm surprised by how quickly some of these people allowed their rage to replace their rationale, or perhaps their rationale was always nothing more than rage and they were merely pretending to be holier than those they hate. Or maybe they're just grifters, I don't know. I thought the people opposing the pink shirts would just scoff it off, laugh at them, and get it over with, but oddly, a lot of the red shirts are acting identically to the pinkies, and they're both acting identical to lawyers. Now, we all know the blood-sucking lawyers will twist anything in order to present their case as beneficially as they can to themselves. If there's a way to worm a word into sideways speech in order to protect their client, then that's what they will do, because lawyers are an inherently criminal aspect of the justice system. They cannot succeed without winning, and every case must then have at least one villain protected by a lawyer, with some cases having multiple faulted parties. So there's really more lawyers protecting villains than there are lawyers protecting innocent people. Lawyers are basically anti-just. They aren't there for fairness' sake. They are there as part of an institution, which I'll touch on later. They aren't truth seekers. They just want to win, get a paycheck, and more than anything, create a legacy of being great at their job. It's not about justice for a lawyer. Nor is it about justice with the pink shirts. Many are just delusional, bored women who think they need to support Lindsay, whatever that word even means, it's used so much these days, because they are both females. That's not evil, they're just dumb and emotional. Some women are positive that she had a mental breakdown, and so they wanted to exonerate her on the basis of insanity, which is totally reasonable to believe, considering there's no way to prove insanity and her alibi, true or false, has been set up well enough that this requires actual investigation, proper investigation, and interrogation, something that you can't do on TikTok. Others are vile, awful, horrible, hateful monsters who believe that Lindsay is innocent by virtue of being female, which of course means the male must be at fault. And they are clearly the creation of things like Reddit, Blue Sky, TikTok, and the Lifetime Network and so forth. You know, the political parties who have been bribing certain demographics with things like abortion for decades. Then there's the red shirts, whom, as I said, are acting no differently. Okay, well, they aren't standing in solidarity with Lindsay, obviously, but aside from that, they're acting the same. Moderates on both sides believe that she's guilty and that she needs to be locked up, which is where I'm at, though they differ in whether or not they think it was premeditated, and I cannot really say if she was having a psychotic break. I don't think anyone besides Lindsay could ever really know that, and even then, consider how the brain functions normally, where it's easily capable of gaslighting itself. And the story is that she had been on and off powerful prescription medicine designed with the explicit intent to alter her brain chemistry and transform her very literally into a totally different person in order to balance her imbalance and bring her back to sanity. So if she was actually taking such a medicine that would turn her into a different person, then it's entirely possible that Lindsay herself may not know the truth, unless all of this, going to doctors for all this time, getting treatments, talking to her family. Strange as it sounds, she herself might not know the truth of her actions unless it really is a galaxy brain scheme that she had murdered her children and escaped the consequences of her life, which I think that would make for quite the Lifetime movie. It would be interesting to see how they rewrite it to make Patrick evil, as Lifetime always does, but I just can't see myself buying into it, and I think it's far too easy for people on the right wing, particularly men. And again, I don't really think this is political, but I do think that political aspects of it bleed into it. And so I think men just want to see this as something to do with abortion, and women want to see this as something to do with childbirth and society failing them. And honestly, I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's something else entirely. And this is the narrative of the extremist red shirts, that she machinated all of this. They want to insist upon something that fits their narrative perfectly. And this mentality is indistinguishable from how the freaks of TikTok are talking about how Lindsay is actually completely innocent and how she was framed by her husband. All of the red shirts are claiming, without a concluded trial and without a shadow of a doubt, that Lindsay was 100% malicious in this, that it was premeditated, the entire thing was machinated by her, and that she needs to be publicly executed. And this mentality is indifferent. It's indifferent to the astrology hags on TikTok claiming that actually Patrick murdered the children because he's a Gemini. Both of these groups need their narrative to be true. Like the lawyers, they are not truth seekers and they do not care about justice. The red shirts, whatever you want to call them, they need Lindsay to be evil. The pink shirts, whatever you want to call them, they need Patrick to be evil. They need to win a fake fight against random people on the internet so desperately that they throw away their integrity. And this isn't uncommon, and it's something I try to be very moderate about when taking sides on the unknown. Yes, I have my thoughts. Yes, I make fun of people, but I try to not become so engaged in a flittering belief that I find my foot buried ankle deep in dried cement, unable to retreat from some stupid claim that I made, such as men can get pregnant, which I've never actually said. Remember, the entire point of the court system is to culminate in a truth that the majority of people find acceptable. It's not actually about justice. It's not even about finding the truth, depending. It's about appeasing the masses. Too many cowboy posses going around hanging people, and we become an insular tribal society. The courthouse is a place for people to place faith in the government that they will find a correct solution. It's what creates civilization. It's what creates high trust. The trust in the government is necessary. Obviously, this fails a great deal, but people realize that if you act normally, you won't end up in the court to begin with, so we can overlook some of the failures in favor of the greater good. Without trust in the courts, the system fails and it's anarchy. While some people do want that, I think we're better off letting the court do its thing. I mean, I'll complain about how slow it is, and I may disagree with the outcome sometimes, but I'll never be on the social media talking about how people who are responsible for things I don't like in the court system need to be hanged, as many people seem to be doing, even with their legal names and faces all over their social media. Now, firing the judges or whoever, yeah, perhaps, definitely in some cases. But if people are afraid to sit on the judge's throne for fear of being murdered, then the entire system has failed already. If we start rationalizing innocence and murder based not on the trial itself, but in our disgust of each other, then what is the goddamn point of civilization? The pink shirt extremists don't care about this trial. They just want the man to be evil and the woman to be innocent. And the red shirt extremists don't care about justice. They just want the astrology hags to suffer for accusing men of being evil based on a star chart. Yes, I find the astrology hags to be unbelievably annoying, but that doesn't mean Lindsay deserves a public beheading. I don't think this happenstance is particularly political, but to reiterate myself, it does sort of kind of feel like the nature of our politics, being the bribery of specific demographics and the abandonment of others, is to blame for this becoming a gender war instead of a trial. In the same way as many relevant things such as George Floyd or Carmelo Anthony, I don't think most of these pink shirts are misandrists or feminists. I just think they're overly empathetic and bored. Even the ones who think she needs to be locked up forever are still parading around outside of the courthouse waving foreign flags for some reason, in some twisted form of solidarity for Lindsay, simply because they're both females. I mean, if you think she needs to be locked up forever and you're out there parading around in front of the courthouse, I mean, I can only assume it's for the sake of projecting, seeing her as yourself, right? I mean, I guess there could maybe be some other reason the girls are doing it, but that's the way I'm looking at it. At best, you could say that they're trying to raise awareness for all of this, but again, this woman, Lindsay Clancy, had every element of care that the world has to offer, where 99.999999999% of women do not. So such complaints about the medical system failing her, I mean, it's fine to look at from a legal point of view, but as far as the entire country or the entire modern progressive world failing women, using this as some sort of virtue signal for that, I don't think that's accurate. I think it falls short of its meaning if you're not caring for the other 99.9999999% of women who don't have all of the things that Lindsay Clancy had. And as I said in my previous video, there is no magic bullet to stop a brain going haywire, not with current technology anyway. It's as intelligent as shouting "fuck cancer." No one is cheering for cancer. It just makes you sound like a child and an idiot when you say it. But own bias does not necessitate sexism. Likewise, the angry red shirts aren't necessarily misogynists. They're just bitter about the accusations. As a man, I could tell you the bear versus man question was indeed infuriating, but it didn't make me hate women. Plural. They just made me hate specific women, insisting that men are uncontrollably violent animals. The sexist and political aspect of all of this is a direct result of echo chambers and social media. Normal people don't use astrology to justify murder. And it's not just about Patrick. It's about being a man born in a certain month. That's all it takes for you to be a murderer, apparently. And this is, again, what my previous video was worrying about. It wasn't about the case itself. It was about the advancement of psychosis, and this is psychosis as well, the TikTok astrology witches who are condemning all men as murderers because of when they were born. Likewise, this video is supposed to be about how an irritation towards one person can become a death sentence for another, something we see constantly in social media rhetoric these days. But I do feel like I should also reiterate my position on the case. I did that last time as well. I'm not going to go over the entirety of it because I think she needs to be locked up regardless. Even if they say she had a psychotic break, which is something I'm agreeing with, that seems to be the most likely thing given the evidence, but that's still a problem. Like, she is still a problem. And giving her absolutely no punishment is something that the majority of people would not accept, which, as I said, the courts are there to give an appropriate punishment that the average person will accept. It fails sometimes, but that's just the point of it. Though, I do think some sort of farm or factory for crazy people to live and work would be infinitely better than a prison or like an insane asylum or something where they're just a drain on the economy. But again, she could be found guilty of premeditated murder. I don't know. I'm just glad that I'm not on that jury, especially as, if I recall correctly, random white people were being physically assaulted under the presumption that they were jurors for Carmelo Anthony, making being a juror, just like being a judge, an increasingly dangerous calling. And being a juror isn't really even a calling, so it's extra unfair. So, as the story goes, she has an overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that she was having some sort of episode and needed help. She sought help in many different ways, received help in many different ways from many different people and places, and ultimately she sent her husband out to get food and medicine after checking the travel times of how long it takes him to get there and back on Google. This is supposed to suggest that it was premeditated. This is incredibly flimsy to suggest that it was an attack. As someone who was once an alcoholic, I can tell you with a great deal of shame that there were times when it was somewhere around, noon, and I was totally clear-minded. Then, if the family left the house, I saw it as an opportunity to sneak some whiskey, which was kept in the kitchen, without anyone noticing me day drinking. This wasn't some sort of plan or scheme that I had. The thought suddenly struck me as an opportunity, like seeing a flashing light in a video game and knowing that's when you press the parry button. And so I did, without so much as a first thought, let alone a second. Even though I was sane, and even though I was sober, and even though I knew that alcohol is pure poison ruining my life, I still did it instantaneously the instant the opportunity arose, without any planning. Likewise, I've done so many things and then forgot I even did them. And I say that because you can just do something at a spur of the moment. It doesn't necessarily mean it's premeditated, regardless of what it is. So people want to say that it was premeditated, that she knew it would take him this long to get there, and she planned out that she was going to do it in this amount of time frame. But the thing is, you would normally look up how long it was going to take to travel somewhere, right? Oh, I mean, she had kids to take care of, right? Like, maybe she was going to bathe one of them. And then what was the daughter was named Cora, the eldest was, I think, Cora. Maybe she was going to bathe Cora, and that's what was going to happen whilst he was gone to get the food. And then suddenly, like a lightning bolt out of the blue, it struck her to murder them all. Like, I don't know how the psychosis works, and neither do any of the people who are trying to attach themselves to it. The red shirts, they're trying to say that she's, with the extremist red shirts anywhere, they're trying to say it in the worst possible way, and the extremist pink shirts are trying to say it in the worst possible way. And I think it's probably something a little bit more moderate. Just today, I was looking for paper towels. I usually keep a roll in my room, but I couldn't find any. So I look in my trash can, and lo and behold, there is the empty roll of paper towels. I must have used them all last night in a sleep-deprived state, but I don't remember that. I don't remember using all the paper towels and then throwing them away, throwing the roll away. Now, obviously, that's not quite as insane as strangling your 3 children, but it's still something that I did while sober and have no memory of. And that was less than 24 hours prior. And this kind of thing happens all the time. And I guess the reason I'm saying this is because both the pink shirts and the red shirts are drawing odd conclusions about this psychotic break. And that conclusion seems to be whatever fits their narrative, whatever they want it to be, whatever makes their story sound better, which, again, that's why I say they sound like lawyers. Everyone says this recently, and I absolutely hate it, but it is true that two things can be true at the same time. If you hear psychotic break and you think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then you have no idea what a psychotic break actually is. It doesn't mean they see spiders crawling all over everything all the time. There's countless ways to break the brain. I'm no expert on this, but experts can't be sure either, as there's no magical test to tell whether or not someone's gone crazy. On the one in this case, Sathoff, he said that the scary man's spooky voice that Lindsay was supposedly hearing stopped after she strangled the children, and Sathoff said that this was unusual for people undergoing psychosis. He also said that the voice was constant instead of intermittent, which is also unusual, and that she never reported hearing the voice to doctors. The thing is, people will say maybe her brain's just different. And they'll say, and have said, that the reason she did not report this to doctors is because they would throw her in an asylum for the rest of her life, which is completely true, and I'd say that's a reasonable defense at the very least. So that's why I say there's no magic bullet to this. It's incredibly difficult and possibly impossible to completely disprove, and if you can only claim that she's lying, then you'd have to say that about every mental illness that cannot be clearly proven. Like, okay, yeah, you can prove someone's got Down syndrome, but you can't prove that they've got bipolar, really, can you? What if they're just faking? What if they don't actually have Tourette syndrome and they just want to cuss in public? You need to claim that everyone is lying. And I suppose you could, but the question is to what end? I personally believe her story, or I'm at least willing to believe it, because I would still lock her up in an asylum either way. As I've said before, there's no happy ending to this. The question is whether or not she's seen as crazy or evil, and I frankly don't give a shit. So for me, I care less about the semantics of this than the outcome, but the semantics are the entire aspect of its social skew, and the reverberations of this social media sludge are causing real-world problems like men and women getting divorced because the woman outed herself as crazy, really crazy, for thinking that Patrick murdered them, and then the husband realizes that his wife is a misandristic lunatic who believes in astrology, and well, I mean, I guess you could say that he dodged the bullet. I mean, maybe not a bullet, maybe a knife or some antifreeze, but I would be considering divorce too, I suppose. Maybe that's not a problem for the man, but it's definitely a problem for the woman. And the greatest problem of all is this social media that everyone is constantly plugged into. And everyone knows it's bad. People say it all the time. Literally everyone knows that social media is horrible. It's a completely bipartisan issue. Even saying bipartisan isn't quite as all-encompassing as the agreement of this. Everyone agrees that social media is bad for most people to consume. Normally, no one would even know about this drama, and it wouldn't impact anyone except the very local people in that town. And now we can see and measure the weight of social media's influence over stupid people, the ones in the astrology chart and such, and we can see how quickly the seemingly rational people turn to irrationality out of anger towards the people throwing muck. The internet was a world-changing invention. iPhones and the resulting social media, a world-destroying one. And I really don't know how anyone can see this and think that we'll escape censorship in the near future. Not when this insanity is such an amazing argument in favor of censorship that it's almost incredible. It's just too good of an argument. Leave people alone and they'll massacre each other over internet drama. So obviously you need to censor your society. It's giving the government all the slack on the leash they need, and pretty soon we'll be choking and coughing for every step we take, like my spastic border collie who can't slow down when I take her for a walk. And again, I'm not trying to police anyone's insults. I made fun of the pink shirts too, and their weird international flags that they were holding up for some reason. All I'm trying to say is that the anger towards a misandristic TikTok influencer should not be the thing that decides a different person's fate, just as a star chart should not decide a man's. Anyway, that's all I wanted to whine about for today anyway. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, please do the YouTube things.